everybody knows, I suppose, Olivier Cornet. This gallery was started in 2012, but he's been an independent curator for much longer than that, and has curated a lot of different shows and contemporary art exhibitions around Ireland, and these special events which are incorporating different art forms. He's very involved with the Parnell Square Cultural Quarter, the development of the Cultural Quarter. And if you've read, there's an article in the Irish Arts Review at the moment, very good one, which says that he's the leader of the new wave of art.
French new wave. And I forgot to say that Marcus is our chair tonight, so Marcus, the floor is all yours.
Okay, thanks very much. You're all very, very welcome here, and thank you for inviting me here. What we're going to do is I'm going to be asking some questions of the panel, and we'll also throw it open to the floor. Keep it nice and fluid, and feel free to agree, disagree, have your own interpretations of every piece. Hopefully we'll make it very, very interesting. I think myself, though, you don't only just see the pieces, you feel the pieces in terms of what it's got to do with 1916 or the idea of the Republic. But the question that I wanted to start with was maybe what is the theme of the exhibition and why did you choose that?
I always wanted to do an exhibition on the Easter Rising, mainly because I didn't know much about it. Sure. And also my previous gallery was located at 5 Cambridge Road, so there was a very strong connection with Michael Collins. He was running a secret office there, so 3 years ago already I was thinking of doing an exhibition on the theme. And then I moved in here and we learned that this building was inhabited by this guy, Lord Norbury, who would have been completely against the idea of a republic for his start. So maybe it's a bit of an irony and a bit of victory as well. This exhibition is titled Republic, in the house of Lord Norbury, who sentenced Robert Emmet to his death. An invitation maybe to meditation, sort of for people to meditate on what 1916 was all about. And he said it, I mean, there are so many different facets to the rising, what happened when people died, and so what we were hoping, and I think maybe we've achieved that, is for people to walk in and have a look and start thinking about what happened and what is happening nowadays as well, and different artists obviously have responded in a different way. So,
okay. Just to ask some of the artists, maybe, could you tell me about your motivations in terms of your piece and what piece you have maybe in the exhibition?
The piece on the right
is
the two just there beside the door. Getting access to the image to work from actually proved to be a kind of a part of the work itself. I had done a tour of Arbour Hill graveyard. In doing the walk around the graveyard, he gave like this handout, and on the second page of the handout there was this small sketch, and it was of the graveyard in Arbour Hill where the Republicans had been buried. They were buried in quicklime, and they were they only had their name pinned to their breast, and had no coffins, and they buried without ceremony, and so that there wouldn't be a plot where people could, so it could be politicised. A British soldier to do a sketch of the grave and who was where in the grave, and this to me I thought was fascinating, that somebody who was a soldier to undertake this artistic exercise, but was actually going to have such significance, is the only record of who was where in the grave was this map that was drawn by, this quick sketch that was done by a soldier who wouldn't be even familiar with the area. But then this documentary was done with Michael Portillo, and it was called The Enemy Files, and it was basically Michael Portillo walking around Dublin meeting various historians, and he had this man bag with documents from the archives that may not have been seen generally before. Lo and behold, he turns up at Arbour Hill, and he has the bag, and he's meeting Declan Coyford. And he's in Arbour Hill, is there any chance? And next thing, that bag is opened, and he rips out the map.
Can you explain your piece, which is over here in the corner?
Mine's there's 40 small paintings, just boys and girls. It's based on there were 40 children that were killed during the week of the Rising, And I was lucky enough that Joe Duffy put together a book and did all the research for me, so I used that as my reference just in terms of the names and the ages of the kids and where they lived and where they died and how they died.
So every one of them is a child who died in 1960?
Yes, yeah, with names and ages and everything. So it became quite a moving process, in some ways more than an intellectual one, which slightly different. And I was saying earlier that I live in Portobello, and I tend to walk here every day, so through the centre of the city where most of the rising took place, so the battles and all I'm walking through and I'm like, that's where that little girl died, or that's where they were standing in their window and stuff. So it became quite an interesting process from that way. And I tend to paint kind of childlike imagery anyway, and so just thought it would make sense to kind of commemorate, I guess, the kids that were killed, and then the King Street Massacre, as we talked about.
King Street Massacre. Christopher Hickey, the chap with the glasses, on that piece there, I've done a documentary on North King Street, and he was in a house with Thomas Hickey, and being held up by the South Staffordshire Regiment, and they knew that they were going to be killed. Like, that was a planned execution, I mean, it wasn't like friendly fire or accidental shooting. That was deliberate. So some of the stories are heartbreaking.
The relations are Thomas and Christopher Hickey. Thomas was my granduncle, and my dad was called after the two of them.
And what happened to them?
They were slaughtered down on King Street on the 29th of April 1916, and they've nothing to do with the rising or anything.
Do you want to add anything to that?
Just it was a pure murder, and even the truth of the saddle was that they robbed the bodies afterwards. They stole the watches and off them, which was very so how pitiful the whole situation was. And the mother died 4 years later of a broken heart, so the family was wiped out in the massacre.
There's 40 lives that were taken, and for me as a Canadian, it was a great way to learn more about Irish history. Maybe also, I was just shocked at some of the things I just learned about. The fact that the Rising, I think it's okay to say, wasn't the most popular thing at the time, and I didn't know that.
I wanted to ask you your thoughts on the exhibition and what spoke to you.
You have, like, for example, the iconic lily, which you wouldn't be seen dead with years ago because of its connotations with dissident Republicans. And that was one of the things that really struck me about this whole preparation for the visual art exhibition, is the fear that people had to get involved. Because I'll just give you an example with this particular project. I kind of started talking about it in 2014 and put it out to some of the members of the studio. And of course they were all interested in talking about the word war, which really, as far, which obviously there were Irish people involved in. But they didn't really want to talk about 1916 because you don't talk about 1916. And I was a child in 1966. So I remember the euphoria of celebrating 1966.
It's very different.
It was completely like, okay, it was really mad because you have these people who are, all these men that are heroes, and there's no mention of women, of course, which we found out about later. And you also have the celebration of this nationalism and the fight for freedom, and we were told not the truth at all, and we were encouraged to be very kind of gung-ho about the whole thing. Blowing up of the pillar was really, an iconic symbol. But in the intervening years, you have this fear of having anything to do with an Irish flag, a lily, and any discussion about 1916. It was like it wasn't the done thing.
I find this has not been talked about, and the witness statements have been released, which is volunteers in their own words, rather than the historian's interpretation of what it could have been. I find it very, very interesting here from their point of view, and that brings me nicely to ask you a question I asked you last week, so I was going to ask you this week. As a 1916 relative, is there a weight to remembering either the relative or the event of 1916 correctly?
Yeah, there's a big break. It's a very serious subject, and it's very important to our family. I grew up secretly in a way, not discussing it with anybody.
Yeah.
But we knew it was always very important.
Yeah.
But it was something that we kept hidden. So I'm delighted that this exhibition is actually on, because it's sort of like, it's a bit like coming out as a relative.
That pressure that you feel, I felt it as well, because I felt that co-curating a review, I had to get it right as well. So I felt that sense of responsibility as well. And for me, because I was born in 1966, so this idea that I'm only going to get one shot at it.
Yeah.
No pun intended, but to get it right. And so with all, I feel that sense of responsibility that you have, that exists in your family. And for me, I felt that pressure as well, and that's why I wanted this exhibition to be a quiet exhibition. Every time I talk about it, I'm always, not because it's taboo, it's this idea of being able to and then look at it 100 years later, and away from, so yeah, that sense of weight that you have, I think you've shared it with me unconsciously, but it's there. It was there for me all the time. And this idea of getting it right.
Yeah.
And I never felt that for any other. Of course you want to get it right, but that for me was added pressure. I don't know if for you it was the same curating an exhibition, but for me I felt that very strongly, that I want this to be all-encompassing, and I want as many people to enjoy it, I don't know if that's the right word, but so you want to create a lot of different dialogues, you want to present different facets, and so this sense that I felt very strongly about this. For the very first time, I've done a few exhibitions over the years with that one. So for me it's been a really important exhibition.
Would you want to explain maybe somebody else's work, maybe that isn't here, or your take?
Yeah, well the one behind it, we picked that guy early. It's Larkin Walsh, he's not here today, but he's a painter, and he's a very good painter. And he did a series called Artifact. It was an exhibition of works from the National Museum.
Sure.
And it sort of, well, there's a lot of different things about it. But first of all, it brings us back thousands of years.
Yeah.
It's not just, we're not only talking about 100 years ago. Ireland has been there for, and that's one part of it. Another part of it is, it's a bell, but it's on a table or something, it's silent. It's a silent bell. And like a bell, normally at the end of war or end of conflict, there's bells are ringing and everybody's celebrating. So in this case, it's silent. We're not sure really. Is the war over, or will the war ever be over? You can broaden it out that much. Is there always going to be conflict? Will we ever get it together? So I think that's kind of the question that the exhibition starts with.
Well, the idea of whether we commemorate or we don't commemorate.
How do you find it compared to France and how they commemorate periods?
That was very interesting for me, because you want to avoid comparing, but you do.
Yeah.
And for me, at least the Rising, the one thing that is closest to home is Bastille Day and taking of the Bastille, but the luxury that we have in France is 1789, so it's not such a long time ago. So we have the luxury of time, you see. So nobody would question the taking of the Bastille, But what is interesting for me is this idea of commemorating. What is it that we commemorate in France when we commemorate, Bastille Day? We certainly don't commemorate the violence. Nobody does, So for me, it was very interesting to see why it's so divisive in Ireland. And I was saying to Owen, give yourself 200 years, and then I think the way you'll be commemorating this, the Rising will be very different. I could be wrong. I don't have this foresight, but to me, maybe it's arrogant on my part to think that because we've lived the French Revolution a certain way that nobody would question. You could obviously feel sorry for the amount of death. God knows how many people lost their heads during the Revolution. But So for me, that has been very interesting to see. It's been a very enriching experience for me. You know, to work with a relative of Easter Rising, and you know, and to learn how to deal with a topic like this.